one town was hit particularly hard, and it was again Gibson City, Illinois. It's time to ask your meteorologist, figure out what in the world happened. Jack Gerfen joins me. Man, Gibson City's had some rough luck these last few weeks.
Yeah, they've got, 10 inches of rain in the span of just a few hours. And then yesterday, we had what we think was a downburst that occurred. We're going to talk about just fall-like conditions, and then this happened. It's a good kind of a way to kind of explain something that once again happened to Gibson City.
Yeah, I saw some video on Twitter, I think, that it looked like a hurricane.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, we had some very strong winds that occurred in Gibson City. We saw it on our radar with the velocity, but we do think what we had in Gibson City was actually a downburst. And so we have this graphic here that kind of displays in a painting what it is. Essentially, a downburst is air that just comes straight down from the cloud. And obviously, it can't go anywhere once it hits the ground, so it spreads out everywhere. And so this is what it looks like from the side. The downdraft is where your rain showers are. And what we think happened is that this was a wet microburst or a wet downburst, and that there was a lot of rain with the storm, and it caused all that, not only rain to come down, but also just air to come down too. Cooled air, which is more dense than the warm air around it. And it just comes down at a very fast rate, crashes into the ground, and then you have what are called your outflow fronts that come out from that, and that's where your strong winds are going to be.
Now, normally a storm would be moving west to east or east to west or whatever, and it's probably fairly easy to track how fast it's moving and how fast the winds are blowing.
Yeah.
Is it more difficult with something like this because it's coming from sort of top to bottom?
We can still see how fast the actual storm cell is moving on the radar. The problem would be to measure the actual winds, because if the winds are coming out at 50 miles an hour, but it's moving 20 miles an hour,
right,
it could be 70 miles an hour on one side of it, or only 30 miles an hour on the other side of it. So it just kind of depends. The stronger side is going to be the direction that the storm is going.
What did we see in Gibson City? Sort of, what did you figure out happened, and then what were some of those numbers?
Well, we have not got a wind measurement officially just yet. The closest one I saw was 54 miles an hour, but this video, and this is probably the one that you saw on Twitter, this just looks a lot worse than 54 miles an hour.
Sure does.
And so we do think that...
I was expecting Jim Cantore to go flying by at any moment, but he didn't.
This would signify that, just looking at this, we kind of know that, all right, that's got to be probably 65, maybe even 70 mile an hour winds right there with that. And it will be hard to get an official measurement from that because it would happen in a very localized area. But that's essentially what happened. We also had some damage to our own Skycam. This is a time-lapse video. And so from Gibson City, you've got the storm and the shelf cloud coming in here. You've got the rain begin to really pick up at this stage. The next stage, you have far less visibility. It gets really bad right here. And in fact, this is where we think the strongest winds were pushing the rain down and then also out.
This person's got to be thinking, we did not need milk that bad.
Oh, yes, I agree.
I should have stayed at home.
So then the next frame, you've got this. So you've already got damage to the roof of the hospital, and then we've been showing videos on social media about how the dugout blew over, the concession stand had damage to the roof there, and then there's obviously from our reports last night how much heavy wind damage there was in terms of trees that were down too in Gibson City.
This has got to be fairly rare. Is there a way of measuring how often something like this would happen?
You know, every single thunderstorm technically does have a downdraft with it because they all have an updraft too. It's got to be a cycle. The problem is, though, is that when you have these kind of rare events, like they're not totally rare, but they're definitely not exactly all that common to where it just essentially falls out from the cloud like that.
Well, let's hope Gibson City gets a bit of a break moving forward because they've had a rough few weeks. Thank you.
Yep. Luckily, the forecast, though, is nice and quiet this week with a lot of sunshine, so that's good.
We'll take it. Well, if you want to ask Jack a question or two, perhaps there's been a downburst or some sort of hurricane-like event in your area, you could ask him a question, jgerfen at WCIA.com, or send him a tweet at WCIA3Jack.